There are seasons in life when nothing around you looks broken enough for people to worry, yet everything inside you feels as though it is quietly collapsing. You still wake up, you still answer messages, you still do what needs to be done. But deep within, a question keeps echoing through the rooms of your heart. God, what are you doing with my life? Maybe you have prayed for clarity and received silence. Maybe you asked for healing and the pain stayed. Maybe you begged God to open one door, only to watch it close right in front of you. And now you are trying to act strong, while secretly wondering whether heaven has gone quiet over your name. If that is where you are, listen carefully, because one of the greatest mistakes a wounded soul can make is to interpret divine silence as divine absence. One of the greatest tragedies in a season of waiting is to assume that because nothing makes sense to you, nothing meaningful is happening. But the truth is deeper than your current pain, and far more beautiful than your present confusion. God is still at work in places you cannot see, through events you cannot yet explain, and inside parts of your soul you have not fully learned to surrender. What feels random to you is often being arranged by hands far wiser than yours. What feels delayed to you is often being ripened. What feels lost to you is often being transformed. And what feels like the unraveling of your life may actually be the beginning of a holier, deeper, stronger version of your story than the one you were trying to write for yourself. There are moments when your heart looks back and replays everything that went wrong. The relationship that faded, the opportunity that slipped away, the dream that once felt so close, but now seems impossibly far, the prayer you whispered night after night, the one you were sure God would answer by now. You examine all of it like scattered pieces on the floor, trying to find a pattern, trying to force meaning out of pain. But your vision is limited by the moment you are standing in. God's vision is not, you see the fragment, he sees the whole tapestry. You see the ending of one chapter, he sees how it connects to the chapters still hidden. You see what was taken, he sees what must be built. You see tears, he sees seeds. There is a reason your life cannot be interpreted accurately by your feelings alone. Feelings are real, but they are not complete. Pain tells the truth about what hurts, but it does not always tell the truth about what God is doing. Fear can correctly report that something is uncertain, yet completely misread what that uncertainty means. And if you let pain and fear become the only interpreters of your season, they will convince you that God has forgotten you, when he may be preparing you more carefully than ever before. Many people lose peace not because God has left them, but because they have started reading their story from the middle and calling it the end. You are not at the end. You are in the place where faith is asked to stay when sight cannot explain. That place feels lonely. It feels unfair. It feels exhausting. But it is often the place where God does his deepest work. There are things God can only teach a soul once all the noise has been stripped away. There are truths that do not enter through applause, success, and ease. They enter through long nights, unanswered questions, and seasons where you can no longer depend on your own understanding to keep your heart together. This is why some of the holiest work in your life will happen in places you never would have chosen. You would have chosen the open door. God sometimes chooses the closed one. You would have chosen immediate relief. God sometimes chooses gradual healing. You would have chosen a clear map. God sometimes gives daily bread instead. You would have chosen certainty. God often chooses trust, and that is not because he delights in your pain. It is because he sees beyond your preferences into your formation. He is not only interested in giving you what you ask for. He is shaping who you become while you ask. That is a hard truth, especially when your heart is tired. Because tired hearts do not just want theology. They want relief. They want something to hold. They want one unmistakable sign that they have not been abandoned. They want to know that all this waiting is not empty, that all this hurting is not pointless, that all these tears are not falling into nothing. And here's the mercy of God. They are not. Not one tear is unseen. Not one prayer is unheard. Not one delay is wasted. Not one closed door escapes his authority. Not one detour appears before him as an accident. When you feel as though your life has become a collection of painful interruptions, God sees a sequence. He sees the timing. He sees what was prevented. He sees what was preserved. He sees what had to fall apart because it could not go with you into the next season. He sees what had to remain hidden because had it come too early, it would have crushed you instead of blessing you. We often imagine that if something is from God, it should arrive easily and quickly. But that is not how Scripture describes the lives of those most deeply formed by Him. Again and again, God works through process, through wilderness, through waiting, through stripping, refining, delaying, testing, and teaching. Not because He is cruel, because He is precise, because He is after more than temporary comfort, because He knows that a life built too quickly may collapse under the weight of the blessing it prayed for. Think of Joseph. Before he stood in power, he stood in betrayal. Before he interpreted dreams for kings, he carried the ache of dreams that seemed to mock his own life. Before he became the means by which many were saved, he was sold, forgotten, falsely accused, and imprisoned. If you had asked Joseph in the pit whether God was writing a beautiful story, the pit would have argued otherwise. If you had asked him in prison whether God's promises were still alive, the iron bars would have seemed like stronger evidence than faith. But heaven had not lost the plot. God was not improvising. The betrayal of Joseph's brothers did not outrun divine sovereignty. The false accusation did not cancel divine purpose. The delay did not destroy the promise. Every painful turn became a hidden corridor leading toward a future Joseph could not yet imagine. What looked like rejection became relocation. What looked like delay became preparation. What looked like confinement became formation. And later, when enough time had passed for Joseph to see what he could not once understand, he recognized the mystery. What others meant for harm, God had woven into good. That is the kind of God you are dealing with. A God who does not merely rescue from pain, but who can transform pain into a passageway. A God who does not only reverse evil, but can repurpose it without ever becoming the author of it. A God who sees the end from the beginning, and remains steady while you tremble in the middle. So do not rush to name your season by what it feels like alone. The pit was not Joseph's identity. The prison was not Joseph's destination. The silence over your life is not necessarily the verdict over your life. Some of you are grieving because something left your hands, and you still cannot understand why God allowed it. A person, a dream, a plan, a future you had already pictured in your mind so clearly that losing it felt like losing a part of yourself. And because it mattered so much to you, you assumed it must have been meant to stay. But not everything you love is meant to remain. Not everything you ask God to preserve is safe for your next season. Not everything that feels good to your heart is good for your calling. There are times when God removes what you are trying to hold, because He sees what you cannot, that your peace was becoming dependent on something too fragile to bear that weight. He knows when you are building your identity around a door He never intended to define you. He knows when your hope is slowly shifting from Him to an outcome. And in mercy, even painful mercy, He will sometimes let what you depended on shake, so that what is eternal may become your foundation again. This does not mean your grief is small. It means your grief is not godless. God can be present in the very thing you are mourning. He can be loving in the very thing you do not understand. He can be leading in the very season that feels like losing. This is difficult for the human heart to accept because we want explanation before surrender. We want certainty before obedience. We want God to show us the full blueprint, and then we will trust Him. But that is not the pattern of faith. Faith has always involved movement before full explanation. Abraham did not receive a complete map. He received a call. Moses did not understand every turn in the wilderness. He received a cloud and fire for the step he was in. Peter did not walk on a perfectly predictable sea. He stepped onto water because Jesus called him. And you too are being invited into that same holy tension. Not the tension of knowing everything, but the tension of trusting someone greater than your understanding. You may be saying, but I have trusted, and I am still tired. Yes, trust does not cancel fatigue. Faith does not erase grief. Obedience does not make you immune to confusion. Sometimes the strongest faith is not loud. It does not look like public victory. It looks like a weary person whispering, God, I do not understand this at all, but I will not let go of you. That kind of faith is precious. That kind of faith trembles, but it stays. That kind of faith cries, but it prays. That kind of faith does not always feel powerful, yet heaven sees it as deeply beautiful. There are nights when you bow your head and all you can offer, God, is your exhaustion. No polished words, no strong declarations, no spiritual performance, just tears, silence, and the ache of being human. And sometimes you wonder whether those prayers count, whether heaven receives such broken language. It does. God knows how to listen to what your mouth cannot fully form. He understands the weight behind the sigh. He hears the prayer hidden inside the tears. He recognizes the worship concealed within endurance. You do not have to impress God with eloquence for Him to remain near. He is not moved only by grand speeches and spotless strength. He is the Father who draws near to the crushed in spirit. He is not confused by your weakness. He is compassionate toward it. In fact, one reason many people miss the nearness of God is because they are expecting Him to arrive in dramatic ways while He is already present in quieter ones. You look for thunder, He comes in the whisper. You look for immediate reversal. He sends sustaining grace. You look for the mountain to move. He strengthens your feet to stand. You look for every question to be answered. He gives peace that does not depend on every answer. Remember Elijah on the mountain. There was wind powerful enough to shatter rock. There was an earthquake. There was fire. But the Lord was not in those displays. Then came the gentle whisper. And in that stillness, Elijah encountered the presence he desperately needed. There is a lesson in that for you. Do not assume that because your life lacks spectacle, it lacks God. Do not assume that because there was no dramatic sign, nothing sacred occurred. Some of the deepest moments of divine care happen in ways the world would almost overlook. A strange calm in the middle of fear. A verse remembered at the exact moment you needed it. A friend calling on the day you were about to give up. Strength appearing. Just enough for one more day. Conviction returning before your heart hardens completely. Sleep arriving after many restless nights. A burden lifting, not because the circumstance changed, but because something in you finally loosened its grip. These are not small things. These are holy mercies. These are signs that God is not absent in your ordinary life. He is moving beneath the surface, often in quiet ways that sustain you long before they fully explain themselves. And this matters because many people think the real proof of God's love is that He changes their circumstances quickly. But there is another proof just as holy, that He keeps you in the midst of them, guards your heart through them, and slowly transforms you within them. Sometimes the miracle is not the immediate end of the storm. Sometimes the miracle is that the storm did not destroy your soul. Sometimes the miracle is that after everything you have carried, you still have enough softness left to pray. Sometimes the miracle is that what should have made you bitter is becoming the place where compassion grows. Sometimes the miracle is that while life has not gone the way you wanted, your heart is being pulled deeper into the heart of God. That is not a lesser miracle. That is a miracle of the inner life, and it may be the one you most need, because changed circumstances without a changed heart can still leave a person empty. You can get what you asked for and still not have peace. You can reach the door you begged God to open and realize you carried your fear through it with you. You can escape one trial and remain trapped in the same inward patterns. But when God changes the heart, something profound happens. Your circumstances may still matter, your pain may still be real, but they are no longer the only thing defining your inner world. You begin to live from a deeper center. You become less ruled by panic, less dependent on visible outcomes, less easily shaken by the delays that once terrified you. That kind of transformation does not happen overnight. It is usually born in the very seasons most people would rather skip. Look at Hannah. She carried a sorrow that was not only personal but public, a longing that followed her into worship, a grief that ate at her appetite and her peace. Year after year, the ache remained, and the pain was sharpened by misunderstanding. Others could look at her and see emotion. God looked at her and saw a soul being poured out. When Hannah went before the Lord, she did not come with composure. She came with bitterness of soul, tears, and a prayer so deep it was almost wordless. To human eyes, she looked undone. To God, she was in the sacred place where honest surrender begins. And notice this. The story is not precious only because she eventually received Samuel. It is precious because in the process, her pain became prayer, her longing became surrender, and her heart was brought naked before the God who sees. That is what suffering often does when it is brought to God instead of hidden from Him. It becomes a language through which the soul tells the truth. It strips off religious performance. It breaks pride. It exposes what matters. It reveals how much of our supposed control was always an illusion. And in that broken honesty, God often meets us more deeply than we have ever known. So perhaps the season you are in is not only about what you are waiting to receive. Perhaps it is also about who you are becoming while you wait. Perhaps the unanswered prayer has become a room where your heart is learning to stop bargaining and start trusting. Perhaps the delay has become an altar where your idols are quietly losing power. Perhaps the grief has become a doorway through which deeper communion is entering. Perhaps the thing you wanted God to remove immediately is the very thing through which He is teaching you how to know Him beyond convenience. This is why you must be careful not to despise the season of not yet. The season of not yet is painful because it keeps you living between desire and fulfillment, between promise and manifestation, between prayer and visible answer. It stretches you. It reveals you. It confronts everything in you that wants control. But it can also mature you in ways instant answers never could. The season of not yet teaches you whether you want God only as a provider of outcomes or as the Lord of your life. It teaches you whether your peace depends on clarity or on His character. It teaches you whether your identity is built on what you can hold or on whose you are. It teaches you whether your faith survives only in abundance or whether it can also breathe in uncertainty. Those are not small lessons. Those are foundational lessons. And many of the deepest fractures in the soul come from trying to skip them. Some people become disillusioned with God not because He failed them, but because they built a version of faith that could not survive mystery. They believed if they obeyed, life would become neat. If they prayed, doors would open on schedule. If they stayed sincere, suffering would keep its distance. And when reality did not match that formula, they concluded that something was wrong with God. But God never promised a life without wilderness. He promised His presence in it. He never promised that every chapter would feel understandable. He promised that none of it would fall outside His hands. He never promised that the righteous would never cry. He promised that he would be near to the brokenhearted. There is a big difference, and unless you understand that difference, you will continue misreading your life. The wilderness is not proof that God has abandoned you. For Israel, it was a place of dependence, testing, exposure, provision, and revelation. The cave was not proof Elijah had been forgotten. It became a place of encounter. The prison was not proof Joseph's story had ended. It was one of the chambers through which God was moving him toward purpose. The years of barrenness were not proof Hannah had been erased. They became the context in which a deeper surrender took shape. The cross itself looked like defeat, yet it was the doorway to resurrection, so be slow to call something godless just because it is painful. Be slow to call something meaningless just because it is confusing. Be slow to call something dead just because it looks buried. God specializes in working where human sight runs out. There are buried seeds in your life right now. Not everything hidden is lost. Some things are hidden because they are germinating. You may not see growth because growth below the surface is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Roots form in secrecy. Character deepens in obscurity. Trust strengthens in silence. Humility grows in waiting. Compassion is often born in suffering. And wisdom rarely arrives through hurry. If you judge the whole work of God by what is visible today, you may insult the very process that is preparing tomorrow. A seed in the ground does not look impressive. To the impatient eye, it looks buried, inactive, forgotten. But burial and planting can look the same at first. And if you do not know the difference, you will mourn what heaven is cultivating. There are moments in your life when God allows a burial of one thing because he intends a planting of another. One identity must go. One attachment must die. One expectation must break. One false source of security must be dismantled. It feels like loss. And in some ways it is. But beneath the grief, another work is beginning. This is why surrender is so holy. Surrender is not passivity. It is not apathy. It is not pretending pain does not hurt. Surrender is the decision to place even what you do not understand into the hands of the one who does. It is the refusal to let panic be your Lord. It is the choice to trust the heart of God when you cannot trace the shape of his plan. And surrender frees the soul, not because every problem disappears, but because you stop carrying what was never yours to control. So much of your exhaustion comes not only from what has happened, but from the silent war inside you to figure it all out. Fix it all, hold it all together, and predict what comes next. You replay conversations, outcomes, possibilities. You negotiate with the future. You build imaginary scenarios. You rehearse fears that have not happened. You keep your soul braced as if constant vigilance could save you. But anxiety makes a terrible savior. It promises control and delivers heaviness. It promises preparedness and delivers restlessness. It promises protection and delivers exhaustion. God does not call you to solve your future in your mind. He calls you to trust him in the present. This does not mean wisdom disappears. It means your soul no longer kneels before uncertainty as though uncertainty were your master. When Scripture speaks of the peace of God guarding heart and mind, it is describing something astonishing. Not a peace manufactured by perfect conditions, but a peace that can stand watch over the inner life while conditions are still unresolved. A peace not built from explanation, but from presence. A peace that does not always remove tears, but keeps those tears from becoming despair. A peace that can coexist with unanswered questions, because it is anchored in someone more stable than answers. That peace is possible for you, not because you are naturally strong, because God is near. And sometimes the way that peace enters is by breaking the lies your pain has been telling you. Pain says, if this hurts, God must be far. God says, I am close to the brokenhearted. Pain says, if the door closed, your story is over. God says, I can make a way in the wilderness. Pain says, if the prayer is unanswered, you are forgotten. God says, I hear before you finish speaking. Pain says, if you are weak, you are failing. God says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Pain says, you have lost too much. God says, I can redeem the years. Pain says, nothing good can come from this. God says, I work all things together for good for those who love me. These are not sentimental lines. They are anchors. They are truths you must return to because pain is persuasive when repeated long enough. If you do not answer its voice with truth, it will slowly define your inner world. And that is where the real danger lies. The most dangerous thing about suffering is not always suffering itself. It is the false story suffering tempts you to believe. That God is less good than you thought, that you are more alone than you are, that nothing meaningful is happening, that your life has been reduced to damage, that your future is now permanently smaller, that silence equals rejection, that weakness equals failure, that delay equals denial, that grief equals abandonment. Those lies can harden the heart if left unchallenged. They can turn a season of formation into a season of resentment. They can make a person miss the very work God is doing because the person keeps insisting on reading the season through fear alone. So let this settle in your spirit tonight. What you are in may be hard, but it is not necessarily hopeless. What you are facing may be painful, but it is not necessarily punishment. What you have lost may be real, but it is not necessarily the final word. What has gone silent may still be held by the God who knows exactly where your story is going. Do not make a covenant with despair simply because your emotions are loud. Do not call yourself abandoned when heaven still knows your name. Do not assume there is no purpose simply because you cannot see it yet. God has hidden purposes in places the natural mind would never think to look. He hides strength in surrender. He hides growth in waiting. He hides purification in loss. He hides clarity in stillness. He hides future fruit in present pruning. Jesus said that branches bearing fruit are pruned so they may bear more. That means even fruitful places are not exempt from cutting. Imagine how confusing that must feel if all you can see is the knife. Yet pruning is not hatred, it is care with vision. It is the gardener refusing to let the branch waste its life on lesser growth. Could it be that some of what feels like loss in your life is also pruning? Could it be that God is cutting away what would have drained your future strength? Could it be that what feels severe to you is in fact wise preparation? Could it be that He is not reducing your life, but focusing it? Sometimes God says no because He loves you. Sometimes He says wait because He loves you. Sometimes He closes a door because He sees where that hallway ends. Sometimes He lets a season stretch because a shallow heart would misuse what a deeper heart can steward. Sometimes He strips away distractions because He is calling you back to what matters most. And none of that means the pain is easy. It means the pain is not empty. You may be in a season where all your usual supports feel thinner than before. The words that once stirred you do not land the same. The routines that once gave comfort now feel mechanical. The certainty you once had feels softer, less immediate. That can frighten a believer. It can make you think something is wrong with your faith. But sometimes God allows a holy thinning so that you stop leaning on the feelings produced by faith and learn to lean on God Himself. There is a difference between knowing spiritual language and resting in divine reality. There is a difference between being comforted by familiar patterns and being held by the living God. And if He loves you enough, He will not let you settle forever for substitutes. This is why some seasons feel stripped, not because God enjoys emptiness, because He is making room. He is making room by removing what numbed you. He is making room by exposing what ruled you. He is making room by loosening what possessed too much of your heart. He is making room by teaching you to hunger for what actually satisfies. And room feels empty before it feels full. That is part of why transition is so uncomfortable. We mourn what was, but cannot yet touch what is coming. We are between identities, between seasons, between forms of understanding. The old has lost power, but the new has not fully arrived. And in that in-between place, the soul can feel unstable. Yet the in-between is not wasted ground. The Israelites had an in-between between Egypt and promise. David had an in-between between anointing and throne. Joseph had an in-between between dream and fulfillment. Jesus had an in-between between promise spoken and ministry revealed. God works in in-between places. He trains there. He strips there. He clarifies there. He humbles there. He protects there. He teaches dependence there, so do not despise the in-between. The in-between may be where your roots go deepest. There is another reason your current season may feel confusing. God often protects you from knowledge that would overwhelm you. You think you need to know everything now, but sometimes not knowing is mercy. If God had shown Joseph the full path through betrayal and prison at the beginning, would the knowledge have strengthened him or crushed him? If He showed you every twist ahead, every goodbye, every delay, every necessary undoing, would your heart be able to receive it? Sometimes God gives light only for the step because the full road would be too much. He is not withholding to torment you. He is measuring revelation according to love and wisdom. You are not strengthened only by having answers. You are also strengthened by learning how to trust the one who knows. That kind of trust changes a person. It makes them less frantic, less desperate to control, less shattered by interruption. It teaches the soul a holy steadiness, not because the person has become numb, but because they have discovered that God remains God even when life is difficult. And that steadiness becomes a witness. Because one day, someone else will look at your life and ask how you survived a season that should have broken you. They will ask how you kept loving when disappointment had reasons to harden you. They will ask how you kept praying when heaven felt quiet. They will ask how you carried sorrow without becoming swallowed by it. And your answer will not be that you were stronger than everyone else. Your answer will be that God met you in hidden places, that He kept you one day at a time, that He did not always explain, but He sustained, that He did not always change the situation quickly, but He kept changing you, that He taught you how to tell the truth about pain without bowing to despair, that He turned wounds into wisdom and tears into testimony. This is one of the mysteries of God. He does not merely bless you for yourself. He also forms in you a kind of compassion that can become shelter for others. The comfort you receive in your trials becomes something you can one day give away. The tenderness born in suffering makes you able to sit with other people's grief without trying to fix them too quickly. The patience learned in waiting makes you gentler toward those still in process. The mercy that carried you through your own confusion makes you less harsh with people who do not yet know how to name theirs. In that way, your suffering can become deeply fruitful, not because suffering is good in itself, but because God is able to draw good from it. He can create wells in wounded places. He can make soft ground out of broken ground. He can bring forth a depth in you that comfort alone never would have produced. And for many of you, that is already happening, even if you have not realized it yet. You are kinder than you used to be. You are less quick to judge. You are more aware of your need for grace. You are less impressed by shallow victories. You are more hungry for what is real. You are learning how to discern what matters. You are discovering that peace is more precious than appearance. These changes matter. They may not look dramatic on the outside, but heaven counts them as holy growth. Do not overlook the quiet evidence of transformation just because your external circumstances have not changed as fast as you hoped. God may be answering you more deeply than you recognize. It is also possible that the thing you keep calling a delay is actually alignment. We assume everything should happen when we feel ready, but feeling ready and being ready are not the same. There are people God must position. There are hearts He must prepare. There are timings He must arrange. There are unseen mercies He is coordinating. There are dangers He is preventing. There are lessons He knows must land first so that the blessing does not become a burden. Ecclesiastes says there is a time for every purpose under heaven. That means timing is not an accessory to God's will. It is part of it. A right thing at the wrong time can still wound. A gift received too early can become misused. A door opened before the soul is ready can expose a person to weights they cannot yet carry well. So when heaven seems slow, do not automatically interpret slowness as resistance. Sometimes slowness is protection. Sometimes slowness is preparation. Sometimes slowness is love moving at the speed wisdom requires. And yes, it can ache. It aches because desire is real. It aches because hope has a pulse. It aches because you are not a machine. You are a human being with longings, limits, and a heart that bruises. God knows that. He does not despise your ache. He invites it into relationship with Him. Bring Him the ache, not just the polished version of it. Bring Him your honest disappointment. Bring Him the prayers you are afraid sound too raw. Sound too raw. Bring Him the jealousy you feel when others seem to receive what you are still waiting for. Bring Him the fatigue of holding yourself together. Bring Him the questions you feel guilty for having. He is not fragile. He can handle your truth. In fact, healing often begins when performance ends. As long as you keep trying to look spiritually fine, some of the deepest places in you remain untouched. But when you come as you are, undone and needy, the door opens for a different kind of encounter. The encounter where God does not merely approve your strength, but ministers to your weakness. The encounter where He does not reward your image, but restores your soul. Many people want God to hurry and fix the visible part of their life, while God is patiently tending the invisible part that will determine how they live through every future season. That invisible part is everything. It is where peace either grows or decays. It is where trust either deepens or fractures. It is where identity either roots in God or gets attached to passing things. It is where pride either softens or hardens. It is where fear either dominates or gets displaced by love. If the inner life is neglected, no external success can rescue you for long. But if the inner life is rooted in God, even sorrow cannot fully destroy you. This is why Scripture speaks so often about a heart. Not the image, not the surface, the heart, because the heart directs the life. And God is after your heart, not only your outcomes. He wants your yes in the dark, not only your praise in the light. He wants your trust when the prayer is delayed, not only your celebration when the answer comes. He wants your dependence when your own resources fail, not only your gratitude when provision appears. He wants you, not just the part of you that knows how to smile once the storm has passed. That is what makes this relationship holy. You are loved before the answer. You are seen before the breakthrough. You are held before the explanation. You are not standing outside God's care until your circumstances improve. You are already within it right now in this very chapter. In this season you would not have chosen. In these unanswered questions, in these weary nights, in this aching hope, you are within the care of God. And if that is true, then this season cannot be meaningless. It can be mysterious. It can be painful. It can be longer than you wanted. But it cannot be meaningless, because God does not waste what he gathers into his hands. Not your tears, not your prayers, not your obedience, not your waiting, not your weakness, not your story one day. You will look back and notice details you cannot yet see. You will see certain delays that spared you from things you once desperately wanted. You will see relationships that ended because they could not carry the weight of where God was leading you. You will see doors that closed because they opened toward smaller lives than the one he had in mind. You will see that some of your most painful seasons were also the seasons where your roots went deepest. You will see that the nights you thought were empty were full of unseen preservation. And perhaps most of all, you will see that God was not merely taking you somewhere. He was making you someone with deeper trust, someone with gentler eyes, someone less controlled by panic, someone more anchored in truth, someone less fascinated by appearances and more hungry for reality, someone who can stand in uncertainty without being owned by it, someone who knows by experience that God does not leave his children in the dark, even when he does not turn the lights on all at once. That person you are becoming is not an accident. It is being formed line by line, prayer by prayer, surrender by surrender. So do not give up in the middle of the sentence. Do not decide the whole story from one hard page. Do not let one closed door teach you that all doors are closed. Do not let one season of silence convince you that heaven no longer speaks. Do not let pain name God for you. Let God reveal himself, and often he reveals himself most clearly to the soul that has run out of substitutes. That is why some of your losses may become sacred later. Because they remove what was keeping you shallow, they break your false securities. They expose your dependence. They clear the clutter. They force you into a place where the only lasting refuge is God himself. And though that feels severe when it happens, many people later discover that what they once called devastation became the beginning of intimacy. There is a difference between knowing about God and depending on him. The first can remain theoretical. The second gets written into the bones. And bone-deep faith is often born in nights nobody applauds. You may be in one of those nights now. If you are, hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not ruined because the process is slower than you expect. You are not disqualified because you feel weak. You are not abandoned because you still have questions. You are being led even here, sometimes led through green pastures, sometimes led beside still waters, sometimes led through the valley of the shadow, but still led. The shepherd does not cease to be shepherd in the valley. His nearness there may matter more than ever. And if you keep walking with him, even slowly, even tearfully, you will discover something that cannot be learned from a distance, that he really is able to sustain a soul through chapters that looked impossible from the outside. Your job is not to force the whole story into clarity tonight. Your job is to stay near, to stay honest, to stay open, to stay surrendered, to keep bringing him the real condition of your heart, to keep refusing the lie that silence means absence, to keep taking the next faithful step. Sometimes the next faithful step is practical. Sometimes it is simply rest. Sometimes it is obedience in one area you have delayed. Sometimes it is choosing not to rehearse the fear again. Sometimes it is opening the Bible when your emotions would rather isolate. Sometimes it is saying, Lord, I trust you with what I cannot carry. Sometimes it is deciding that even without full understanding, you will not call God unfaithful. Those small steps matter more than you know. A life of trust is not built in one giant moment. It is formed through many hidden decisions that slowly teach the soul where to lean. And with time, something steady begins to emerge. Not a life without hardship, but a life less mastered by it. Not a heart without scars, but a heart that has learned how to carry scars without surrendering to hopelessness. Not a faith that knows everything, but a faith that has seen enough of God's character to keep walking when the road curves out of sight. That kind of life becomes luminous, not because it is easy, because it is real. And real faith comforts people. Real faith strengthens people. Real faith creates space for others to breathe. Real faith makes the invisible goodness of God feel believable again to those who are barely holding on. You may not realize it now, but one day the very chapter you wanted to escape may become the chapter through which someone else learns to trust God again. That is how redemption works. It does not erase the wound as though it never happened. It transforms the wound into a place where grace can shine through. And that leads us to one of the deepest truths of all. God is not only present in your life, He is writing with it. He is writing through the yes you whispered when no one saw. He is writing through the tears you cried in secret. He is writing through the prayers that felt weak. He is writing through the doors that closed. He is writing through the waiting you did not understand. He is writing through your rising after each fall. He is writing through each act of obedience, each hidden surrender, each hard conversation, each moment you chose hope over cynicism, forgiveness over bitterness, truth over fear. Nothing surrendered to God remains empty in His hands. He writes with all of it, and because He writes with all of it, your life is not random. It is not a pile of disconnected sorrow. It is not a series of meaningless collisions. It is not abandoned terrain. It is a story under providence. A story with mystery, yes. A story with tears, yes. A story with chapters you would not have chosen, yes. But still a story under providence, still a story held by love, still a story moving toward the goodness of God in ways your present vision cannot yet fully grasp. So tonight, before you decide that this chapter has no purpose, pause. Before you conclude that your waiting means neglect, pause. Before you assume that the silence means God has walked away, pause. Before you label your tears as wasted, pause. Lift your eyes beyond the fragment. Let your heart remember what your fear keeps forgetting. God is not only the God of the breakthrough, He is the God of the process. He is not only the God of answered prayer, He is the God who keeps you while you wait. He is not only the God of open doors, He is the God who remains sovereign over the closed ones. He is not only the God of visible miracles, He is the God of hidden formation. He is not only the God who changes situations, He is the God who transforms souls. And if He is doing that in you right now, then far more is happening than your eyes can measure. So breathe. You do not need to solve your future tonight. You do not need to understand every delay tonight. You do not need to force yourself into false strength tonight. You can be weak and still be held. You can be confused and still be led. You can be grieving and still be loved. You can be waiting and still be within the will of God. You can be in the dark and still be in His hands. Let that truth quiet the panic in you. Let it soften the place where fear has been speaking too loudly. Let it loosen your grip on what you were never meant to control. Let it invite you back into trust. Not shallow trust, not borrowed trust, but the deep kind that has passed through fire and discovered that God is still God on the other side. And now, if your soul is weary, if your heart has been carrying questions too heavy to explain, if you have been trying to understand a chapter that keeps resisting your understanding, take this moment and turn it into prayer. Father, you see what no one else fully sees. You know the rooms of my heart that still ache. You know the prayers I have repeated until I hardly know what else to say. You know the doors that closed, the things I lost, the fears I try to hide. and the weariness I carry when I smile for others. I come to you without pretending. I come as I am. Teach me to trust you in the places I do not understand. When silence frightens me, remind me that silence is not the same as absence. When delay confuses me, remind me that your timing is not neglect. When grief presses hard against my chest, remind me that my tears are seen by you and never wasted. When I am tempted to name my season by fear, teach me to name you by truth instead. Lord, where I have become anxious from trying to control what belongs to you, loosen my grip. Where I have been exhausted from rehearsing every possible future, give me rest in the present grace you provide. Where I have misread a closed door as rejection, help me trust that you know what lies beyond that door far better than I do. Where I have called myself forgotten, speak more deeply than my feelings, and anchor me again in your faithfulness. Heal what pain has bruised in me. Expose what needs to be surrendered. Remove what cannot come with me into the life you are preparing. Deepen what is shallow. Strengthen what is weak. Soften what has grown hard. Guard me from the lies suffering tries to teach. Do not let bitterness grow where trust is meant to live. Do not let disappointment become the lens through which I see you. Teach me how to wait without despair. Teach me how to obey without full explanation. Teach me how to rest without having every answer. Teach me how to keep walking with you when the road is not clear. Form in me a heart that is steady because it is rooted in your character, not in changing circumstances. And Lord, if you are pruning, help me trust your hands. If you are preparing, help me be patient. If you are protecting, help me stop fighting the door you closed. If you are planting something beneath the surface, help me not mourn it as though it were buried forever. Give me eyes to recognize the quiet mercies around me. Give me discernment to see where you are already sustaining me. Give me humility to accept the process I would not have chosen. Let my life become a testimony not merely of comfort received, but of a soul transformed. Make me gentler through what I have suffered. Make me wiser through what I have endured. Make me more compassionate because of what has broken me. And one day, let the places that once hurt most become places where your light shines clearly through me. I place my unanswered questions in your hands. I place my future in your hands. I place the people I love in your hands. I place the chapter I am in, the chapter I do not understand, and the chapter still ahead in your hands. Write my story the way only you can, and in every part of it, keep my heart near to you. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this spoke to the exact place you are standing in, let this truth stay with you tonight. God is not absent from the chapter you do not understand. He is already there, already working, already holding what feels too heavy for you. And maybe the holiest thing you can do right now is not to force an answer, but to stop calling this silence abandonment and start trusting that even here, God is still writing.